Welcome to ZOOMERTIMES TV. And here's your host, Anita Finley.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anita Finley, your host, of course, for the ZOOMERTIMES TV presentation. And I want you all to sit there, take a deep breath. Don't get ready to move. Don't move from your chair. Don't go get anything to drink. Just sit there and enjoy what's going to happen here. You have heard him before, Monk Yun Rou, who is actually very celebrated for many things. He has many books. You've seen us review them. But he is a true monk, and he's not the kind of a monk that you think that the movie showed. This is a human being who chose what he wanted to do, and somehow we connected. I realize how that happened in a side way, but it's been such a privilege. And I was able to talk to him about, he wrote a beautiful memoir, which will be coming out in print. But at the moment, I asked him if he would just go over some of his thoughts about his memoir, why he wrote it, what life was like, and what it really, it's not an autobiography, it's a memoir, and he'll give you the difference in that. So welcome to our show this morning. I'm so happy that you took the time. I know you've had a lot of experiences lately that you've been trying, but there you are, you keep popping up.
Here I am, and grateful to be with you.
Thank you. So when you were kind enough to send me your memoir, which I was very privileged, and I printed it all out, a lot of pages, and slowly I was going through it. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to just sit there and do nothing else but read, but I kept it by my bedside, my kitchen table, and whenever I got a chance, I started reading it, and I just couldn't believe the life that you had. So if someone said to you, what was your life like? What would your elevator speech say?
The life of a seeker.
Okay.
The life of a seeker in a society that doesn't particularly support seeking, and in a culture that is full of forces at work on people to prevent them quite deliberately from thinking deeply about things, because thinking deeply about things leads us to question things. And when we question things, the people who are benefiting from our work, our time, and in this information age, our eyeballs, they don't want us to really think too hard about things, because when we question, we might stop doing things that are benefiting them, which are not benefiting us. So being a seeker these days, and even, in this Western world, back when I started all this as a child, was never a supported or recognized path. My doctor, my father, who was a famous physician, used to give me an almost daily reminder as I was growing up: if you're not a doctor, you're not feces. So this was used a different word, but this was the refrain. And I do remember I got a bad report card when I was a kid. I was 9 years old. And he called me in to talk about this report card, and he sat behind his desk reading the comments of the teachers. And he says, you're not living up to your potential. And I said, I don't know what that means. And he said, well, it means you're not going to be a doctor like me with grades like this. You're not going to be a lawyer even with grades like this. And you probably won't even be a captain of industry like, and then he rattled off some billionaire friends of his. He said, you're going to be a doorman. And we lived in a building in Manhattan that had a doorman. And I remember thinking, I was 9 at the time of the conversation. And I said, I thought before I spoke, what I wanted to say was, our doorman, Eddie, seems to have a pretty good life. He's always happy. You know, in retrospect, he was drunk and he was happy because he was drunk all the time. But you know, I wanted to say that, you know, Eddie opened the doors for us, and he took the dog for a walk if it was raining or snowing for you, and he brought packages and he helped people find a taxi, and like it seemed like a pretty good life. But I knew better than to suggest that. So instead, I said, I've been reading Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. That guy, that writer, he determines who loves who is rich and who is poor, who is sick and who is healthy, who has fun and who has misery. He's like God. I want to do that.
Ah,
I think this response so stunned my dad that he kind of had nowhere to go after that. And he kind of shuffled the papers. All right, anyway, get better marks. And I was dismissed. So.
and you believed that, didn't you? That you, at that point, that being a writer would offer you everything you wanted.
I remember this was a different generation. Today, to think that you can make a living as a novelist and have it as a career is probably not realistic for anybody. Back then, it was realistic for a few people if you had the right chops and you went to the right school and you had the talent. But now it's not that people don't write successful novels, but rather that the definition of what a successful novel is in a world where we compete, those aforementioned eyeballs are warred over by so many different media platforms, whether it's the internet, television, movies in a theater, streaming content on YouTube or wherever else. That to find, you know, you mentioned to me a few minutes ago that you didn't have time to sit down and just do nothing but read. And implicit in the comment was, you know, that reading is either not as important as other things that you have to do, or that there are too many things competing for your attention. And that is a change in the world, which has happened since my ambitions to be a novelist were born. So now I remember a very famous teacher of mine, a writing teacher of high repute, who was also a powerful editor in New York City at the time. And he gave a seminar, a writing seminar at my alma mater, my undergraduate school, which was Yale. And he gave it every other year and only to juniors. So if you happened to be a junior on a year he wasn't there, you didn't get the chance. And Yale was mostly English and writing majors at that time. It was a very humanities-centric school, college back then. So, you know, 11 or 1,000 people applied for 10 spots for this writing seminar, which took only 10 people and which was reputed to be, you know, really worth doing because this guy could help your career if he liked your writing. And he had discovered famous writers, and, you know, he was a luminous editor. And, you know, likely because he was looking for a certain mix, I got into that seminar. And, you know, one of his comments to me early on was, you know, Mr. Rosenfeld, I went by my birth name back then. It's obvious you can write. The question is, do you have anything to say? And of course, you know, no 19-year-old has anything to say other than drivel, you know. But in his world, you know, you've had all the experiences that you need to be a great novelist by the time you're 5. which is a bunch of horsepucky, honestly. But, this was part of his spiel. But the idea of do we have anything to say stuck with me. And I've thought about it a lot in the, 40, almost 50 years since then. And I think he was onto something that many writers are not onto these days. And that is if you don't really have some kind of message, but if you're just doing pure entertainment, then you would be well to spend your time somewhere else. And when I discovered Taoism and a certain way of looking at the world, I shifted the focus of my writing to present and include these ideas, but subtly, like slipping a little medicine into the strawberry milkshake, which is a description, a metaphor, or whatever I've used with you before. So that when you read a story and you enjoy it, even, the memoir is explicit, but in my fiction, it's just informed and guided by a certain worldview that is different than the one we commonly read about. And so I think there's an old adage that if you want to send a message, use Western Union, which shows how dated the phrase is, but, send an email. I think that's wrong. And I think that any great literature has messages, whether it's Dickens or Dostoevsky.
Yeah, that's true. I was thinking as you were speaking that some things were very important to me. I was very much into Greek and Roman history and loved the philosophers and things there. But it takes, I think, a great mind to be able to think about things, be able to put it into writing so that people can enjoy it and learn from it. And I just have to throw up this book, the Monk Manifesto. I mean, this is superb. How you got everything into how many pages? It's like 300, or let's see, it was 300 and, I think it was almost about 300 pages. So it's what you said. You had a lot to say, and you were able then to write it. And there are people, of course, who are making Hollywood movies, and some of them do make a difference. I just have to stop myself and tell you something. The Golden Girls was so far ahead of itself when it was put in, because those women, it wasn't a book, it was a TV series, that still is very, very important in people's lives.
If you can hit a vein and start mining, you have been successful. You've connected with people. In my case, I'm not the kind of writer. I remember an agent said to me one time, you're the same agent who told me that when we published Monk Manifesto to get bulletproof glass installed on the ground floor of my house, because it would upset so many people. And I said, well, that many people? He said, it only takes one. That same agent said to me, you're not Stephen King. You're not going to have an audience like that because you don't have that sort of common man sensibility about wanting to scare the crap out of people around the campfire. And I said, yeah, I got no interest in doing that. He said, right, but that's what a lot of people want to read, is that kind of stuff. And the kind of stuff you want to write is either very cerebral or intellectual, or very narrow and particular, talking about what you think are important things, and you don't want to waste your time with pure entertainment. And he said, and I think that might be a prejudice on your part against it. And in Manifesto, I say, I like entertainment. I go to the movies and I read sometimes, kind of pop culture novels now and then, just for the fun of following a story. But I'm not interested in doing that myself any more than I'm interested in, taking the invasive fountain grass out of my desert home so it doesn't get too close and cause a fire hazard. I have to ask someone else to help me with that, because that's not the best use of my time. Also, there's a lot of suffering and big stuff going on in the world. We do not, especially now, live in a world where one's time, in my view, should be spent on trivial things when there's so much suffering and there's so much destruction and we're teetering on the brink of terrible stuff. And so what bothers me is not that there's entertainment, because as I said, I like to be entertained as much as another person. What bothers me is that entertainers are celebrities, but people who are working on the forefront of conservation or medical research, and we don't know their names. We never hear, who can tell you who was exactly the guy that developed the COVID vaccine or woman who developed it. Very few of us know those names, and those people are not in People magazine and making zillions of dollars. And if they had a good attorney, maybe they are making zillions of dollars. I hope so. But the point is that we don't celebrate those people. We celebrate movie actors and rappers and this kind of thing. And I'm like, that stuff's great, it's fine, it's fun. But why would our culture center around something like that? And I wouldn't want my own life to be spent doing that kind of work, unless that kind of entertainment had strong messages. And some entertainers do, some comedians do, some rappers do, that connect with people in important ways and make important points that shift culture. But those are the kinds of people who are entertaining with a message, and there are plenty of who are not.
Mm-hmm. I'm continuing with our guest, Monk Yun Rou, because we ran out of time, but he is probably the most interesting guest that I think I've ever had on Zoom, on the radio, and many other places. And so I don't want to miss a single part of what I was reading his memoir, which is going to be coming out, as we said, in a book, but I was privileged to start to read some of it. And of course, when you call someone monk, you think of someone that looks very different from what our guest looks like, because Arthur he didn't grow up in China. He made a decision, and I was asking him, where did this decision come from? I mean, you wanted to be a writer. Why did you think that was going to help you be a writer?
People's idea of monks, I just picked up while you were talking. I just looked over at my little teacup. It's one of those Starbucks teacups that you get when you travel. And this one was from when I lived in Florida. It says Florida. And I noticed it's got this little flower, this little graphic. And if you look at it the right way, if you look at it, it looks like that here, there's a mountain with a meditating monk sitting on the top of it, right? All it is a flower. But when you asked that question and it was sitting on my desk, I looked at it and there's somebody in lotus position meditation sitting on top of a mountain. And it made me think, this is, I do not any longer on account of the politics between China and the United States, but also more on account of the policies of the Chinese Communist Party regarding religion in general. I'm no longer comfortable traveling to China to see my monk brothers and my abbot who ordained me and so on. But there was a moment during my ordination when I got very emotional, and an abbot asked me why I was crying, and I said, well, it's just an emotional moment for me. This is the moment when I received my scroll, my papers. I was fortunate to get an official government monk passport and other documents. I said, well, I guess it's because I feel like an imposter. And he said, really, why is that? I said, well, I'd like to stay here. I'd like to stay here and do the devotions and, practice every day and all that ritual stuff that I enjoy. And he said, so you would like to be like some of the other monks where you tend the garden or run the ritual class or clean the latrines and, sweep. And I said, yeah, I guess so. And he said, interesting. How long have you been doing this? And I said, at that time, 30 something years. He said, did you have a lot of support from your family? I said, no, first of all, I didn't know I wanted to be a monk when I was a child. I just knew I was seeking answers that I wasn't getting. And, I was annoying by, rejecting or not rejecting really, but questioning everything, And earlier we talked about the fact that my dad was a physician and he was a very famous physician. And, the people who ran the world came to him. And I think in some previous conversation, we've mentioned this, but, there was a stream of folks through my parents' New York City apartment that were the luminaries of the time, the people around the world. So when I got to see them, I saw that they were not, so happy. Having everything that we were all taught is what we should want and who we should want to be: beauty, fame, celebrity, money, influence, power, and on and on. And I thought, if that's not true, if those people are just like everybody else, that one of them threw his wife down the stairs and killed her, another one tax evaded, went to jail, another one, his kids hated him. On and on. And they were depressed and they were sick and blah, blah, blah. Of course, there were some folks in that group who were great, happy, wonderful people, but there were also plenty who weren't, just like the regular distribution of people in the world. And I thought, wow, if I'm being told that that is everything that life is, and the important thing in life is to be like that, in our celebrity culture, which is just desperately confused and lost, our American anti-culture. What other things are not true about religion, society, politics, education? Once you see that there's a crack in the floor, you wonder, or what other cracks are there? Where's some other one? So my siblings and all the people around me saw the same thing, but they didn't have these questions. This is a seeker gene. I don't know, what makes someone react to stimuli like that when other people don't. But being drawn to a deeper truth about the way the world works and what's really important, that was born in me long before I had the desire to become a monk. You might imagine that, and the title of my memoir is The Monk of Park Avenue. You might imagine how few others there were. Maybe some, but probably not very many, because the culture and the society and the milieu didn't support this kind of inquiry and the idea that one could become a monk of any kind, in any discipline, in any religion. This is just not, I guess we didn't in our family even discuss the idea that I might be a rabbi. So I was born in a secular Jewish family. And I think, as the grandson of Holocaust survivors, the realities of Judaism were dark and grim and sad. My grandmother had an identical twin sister who was lost to Hitler. And for as long as she lived, which was a long time, being the sole surviving member of her family, she was so racked with pain and guilt that every time she laughed, and she laughed. We had funny times, and she had a great sense of humor, and I would tease her, and we would have great fun. We were very close, but every time she laughed, as if, I don't deserve the laugh. I don't. So these kind of PTSD things for me were associated with the Holocaust, associated with Judaism. And maybe if I'd had a different message from the Jewish community or a different message from any part of the community that I was involved with. Might have become a rabbi, and if I'd been born into a Catholic family, maybe a priest. These kinds of things are in you or they're not, So I had to make my own way through this, and any kind of religious career, but particularly one in a foreign, alien, completely different kind of faith or system of belief, that just never popped up as a possibility during my childhood. The only monks I saw were, like you mentioned earlier, on TV. Now, I do weddings and funerals and so on where I wear robes. And often here where I live in Arizona, I'm out and about in robes. I haven't had an interview with you, I don't think, wearing my full regalia, but maybe another time we'll do that.
I'd like to do that.
But the robes do not make the man. They do not make the monk any more than clothes make the man. The kind of ridiculous aphorism. People say this kind of garbage. Clothes make the man. So I think the path has to be started by some internal some internal generating seed that makes you want to think deeply. In the very beginning of our talk today, we talked about how thinking deeply is discouraged, particularly about things like matters of faith and how we ought to be spending our time. And, people who think deeply about things are scholars. They're in a separate world of academia. Sometimes they're political pundits. Sometimes, they're journalists. But none of those things is particularly celebrated or supported in our culture. And certainly thinking deeply about the way the world works through a Taoist lens, which is not even a word that most people have ever heard in their life, was not, something bandied about. When I was a kid, I had to go looking, I spent a long time looking.
Let me just say something about monks, and I've had no experience. I am an atheist, and I brought up Jewish, but I don't believe in any of those things either for a lot of reasons. But for me, I respect a monk. I don't know much about being a monk other than, I suppose, I don't know why, but something internally for me is the purity, and that they don't want anything, that they accept everything, and the purity is, I think, what I'm feeling, that they are good people, maybe not always, but that they are seeking, as you keep saying, something and not asking for anything, but just being. I don't know what that even means.
So let's go back to my abbot. In that moment when he was asking me why I was crying, and I said I thought I felt an imposter because I couldn't be in the temple. He said to me, you've been doing this 30 odd years and you were not supported by your community or your family in this direction. I said, no, if anything, I was ridiculed or eye rolled or at very least disrespected for these kinds of interests, and but maybe more for my disinterest and rejection of what everybody else seemed to think was so important and they wanted. And I said, and I told the abbot, I said, until, I met my most important teacher, and I began to realize that I could make this the priority in my life somehow in a formal fashion. This was long before I decided I wanted to become ordained as a monk, which I did as a gesture of my seriousness about all this. It's not that he listened to all this and he said, look, most of the monks here stay for 7 years and they're young guys. And they all come from wealthy families. They're wearing gold Rolexes, and when they leave the temple at night, they go in their Mercedes home to a nice house, and they see their wife and kids, and then they come back here during the day.
Really?
Because in Chinese modern culture, the renunciate monk is the aesthete. When you think of Buddhist monks who are walking around with an alms bowl, modern Chinese culture doesn't support that. Everything is very ironically capitalistic, hyper-capitalistic here. So if you're not pitching in to help your family, you're not being a good son or daughter. And that basically isn't an option. So for the people who are monks here, there's a certain inherent elitism to it. Whether it's an intellectual elitism, which Taoism has always had that role, which is a whole other subject. It's never been a way of looking at the world that was immediately accessible to anyone, to everyone. It's a little bit arcane, trying to understand what it is. But also, on a practical level, unless the family has money, they can't, the sons just can't come here to be monks. The daughters can't come here to be nuns unless they don't need to pitch in to support their parents and their grandparents and so on. That's our culture. So he said, the fact that that this path exists for those people here now under Xi Jinping, everything has changed now, and it's very hard to know what the future of any of Taoist temples or monasteries is. It certainly hasn't proven to be good for Christians or Muslims, and maybe not even for Buddhists now. So Buddhists are being given communist scripture to read instead of their text. And things are really quite radically strange in China right now. Most Americans don't know. But he said, for you to have persevered all that time without that clear path before you and without that kind of established support, after 7 years, they go on and they become, they work in a company, or they start something, or they join the family business, or they become a doctor or something. He said, but you were not part of any of that. You just did it on your own. He said, and all I really want you to do is just keep on doing what you've been doing, which is to spread, your mission is to spread these ideas the way you do in media, with your books and with your television and with your interviews like this one. He said that's your monk job, right? So, when he said this, of course, I cried even harder. Even now I think about it. But
that's beautiful. Absolutely. I think he really hit it. He did it.
So, people who don't understand what a monk is, or don't know that there are lay monks and there are monastery monks, and don't understand the changing situation and what my options were in terms of China and having a family here and so on. So I am materially comfortable. I'm okay. I do the things I do in service. That's it.
So the books that like Monk Manifesto and some of your other books, that's really a way for you to describe a lot of your thoughts and to hopefully get people to see things differently.
That's right. So whether it's telling stories that are infused and redolent with these ideas and with this worldview, or whether it's didactic nonfiction like Monk Manifesto, or whether it's my personal interactions with people when I go, talk to a waitress at a restaurant, or a guy filling my, I had a gas tank filling his car next to him while I'm filling mine. I mean, this is my role in the world as a monk. And a lot of people who talk to me have no idea I'm a monk. They don't know me. They just meet me and we have a discussion or something. And, for whatever reason, maybe it's a certain energy or attitude, but, people tend to come up to me and ask me things or share things that they might not with someone else. And that's kind of an energetic issue. There isn't any. Taoism is a very unjudgmental path. We're not big on making distinctions that lead to judgment about things. It's not the way we roll. So people can sense that, I guess.
Is there a word like monking? Could you be monking people? by your very existence and what you do.
People. Yeah, you're so funny. I think we once talked about this idea that if you drop a stone into a pond, you can't control where the ripples go and how big or small they are and how far they travel. But most importantly, you can't control or predict the effect that those ripples will have on the world around you. And just last night in my Wednesday Zoom, Wisdom Wednesday, Zoom class I give on Taoist ideas, one of my students said, well, there's so few of us in the world who see things this way. Look at the way the world is careening towards Armageddon, whether it's, China and the United States racing in the South China Sea and about Taiwan, and there's going to be a war and it's going to get out of control, or whether it's going to be just overpopulation and the killing of the planet and all this stuff. What difference can we make, really? And the thesis of Monk Manifesto, which is the Taoist, a core Taoist idea, is that you can only control you. And you just do what you can do to keep harmony and balance in your own life and in the lives of those immediately around you. Beyond that, those ripples you cannot predict. And, I often receive, gratifyingly often, I receive a communication from somebody that I either don't remember or I haven't seen in decades, or whom I've never met, who was in some other way than direct communication been affected by something I wrote or something I said. And of course, it's not, any of it is not about me. These are not my ideas. I'm a pipe. I'm just a piece of PVC. These things flow through me, and I have a certain way with language that some people respond to and others don't. A certain way of expressing things forthrightly, which some people find offensive and other people find helpful. But the pipe just carries the water. It doesn't make a decision about who is getting what. So, or have an effect on how that water will be received. So I don't, there's no investment or attachment or ego in any of this, because it isn't mine. Now, if I made these ideas up, if I was the one who thousands of years ago devised this amazing way of looking at it, then I would have, some kind of egoic pride of ownership or something. But that's I'm a follower. I'm just somebody who reads and practices things that were developed and elucidated by people much wiser and smarter. And I just find my own way of sharing and expressing those things. That's it. And what happens after that, I can never predict.
How many times, it's interesting that I've heard stories about people who remember their school teacher. They become famous, let's say, and they remember their school teacher and what happened, something that teacher told them or that happened in class, and they took it with them, and they carried it with them forever.
That's right.
And I believe that you probably have infected so many people in a very positive way, I included, that carries forward your message, even though you don't know that. You are a seeker, but people have been seeking things, but they don't know how to do it the way you've done it. And you were fortunate to have a life that provided a lot of things for you, but you didn't take advantage of it in a negative way, which is wonderful. And you still are. I mean, I know that you've been having your own personal liabilities in health, but looking at you and hearing you, it's like it didn't even exist, that you're not really there. Your spirit's there. That's really what I see when I talk with you. You're not sitting there. It's an electrical charged spirit. I'm very much into energy, and I that's how I see you always. and you will never leave. You will be there, just in different form.
Well, that may be the case, and I like the vision, and I appreciate your compliments. And I also now understand why this shirt that fit me so well a year ago is draping off of me like the curtains of, like the curtains in the living room. but it does feel like I physically have greatly diminished through ill health, but I'm trying to come back a little bit. But all through that, I was mostly thinking about, like, how can I apply the teachings to this, and how does this make me a better monk?
Mhm.
That was my primary preoccupation, other than yelling "ow,"
Right. Yeah.
Is there a monk now who you are mentoring specifically?
I have a student who's expressly asked me to lead him down that path. I have another younger student, and that one I just mentioned is a physician. There's another young person who lives an itinerant lifestyle out of his van, or their van. And I think might in the future have the potential to want to go down this path. Will probably be, if I read it right, and if the cards fall the way they might be the last disciple I have, just because of circumstances and my age and all that. But there are other people who seek to be Taoist monks, and there are even now, a few Taoist monks scattered around the country who have a different lineage or understanding than I do, and run courses, to ordain students and so on. I don't do any of that. People come to me, but I'm not a promoter. So sometimes people encounter me, and they may say they want to learn or be something, and my attitude is, let's see how you feel about that in 10 years, and then we'll discuss it in 10 or 15 years. Let's see how it goes for now. So,
Well,
these things are not trivial decisions.
and I was thinking of you, and we are now out of time. We call you a moment by moment monk. You are really
Perfect.
someone who lives moment by moment, moment by moment monk. And that's a very positive thing, because time is nowhere, really. It's every moment. And I thank you. This has been, I know Dan and I both have